Well, hi there. I'd like to welcome everyone back to another video by me, Simon Williams, for GingerGM.com. And I'm now going to have a look at a game I played at the recent British Chess Championships. Now, the British Chess Championships is a big event. It's happened every year. This year it was held in Aberystwyth. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but basically it was held in Wales. It was quite a quaint, nice little town. Had a good time there, really fun little place. But the chess was rather up and down for me. I managed to defeat the top seed David Howe, but I fell off quite drastically in the later stages of the tournament. The game I'm going to look at is probably my best game, and this is me black against the young player Joseph McPhilips, who is about 2200 rating, and this is definitely my best game. Now, there's a couple of things. I mean, don't think I won best game prize. They have a round every round. Andrew Martin, the commentator, awards a best game prize for the best game in a round, and I don't think I've won this at the British Championships in something like 3 years. So 33 games, which is a little bit disappointing because I think some of my games were real contenders. So hopefully next year, Andrew Martin will give me a best game prize at some point. The start of this game was really peculiar. Now, my opponent was quite a young player, and we played the first. I mean, he played e4, I played c5 and wrote my move down, and my opponent, without even writing my move down, banged out knight to f3, immediately making a very large noise when the piece cracked the board. Now, this put me off a little bit. I thought, well, you're a young guy, you should give me a little bit more respect than this. So I played d6 immediately, and my opponent again didn't write the move down, and he played d4 immediately, banging the move out. So the first 6 or 7 moves we played at this speed in the game, and we got to about here when I actually started writing the moves down, and so did my opponent, because this is a very peculiar start to the game for me. I mean, I think it's a bit off-putting, but I don't like being out psyched, so there's a little bit of mind games going on. Anyway, we had a Najdorf variation. Let's now concentrate on the chess. I've had this set up v6 a number of times, and I've had a very good score of it, only losing to Shirov. Now, the normal idea here for white is something like queen d2, and after this queen d2 move, white castles queenside, goes f3, g4, black goes b5, and it's get a very interesting position. My opponent here played bishop to e2, which keeps his options open. He can still castle kingside, but he may also castle queenside if he wants to. And this is a setup I lost against Shirov with. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know the Najdorf, the theory of the Najdorf, really that well at all. And I kind of, at the moment, make it up as I go along, which is obviously not the best preparation. So I didn't want to play bishop to e7 as I did against Shirov. I wanted to try another plan. So I played knight bd7, with some ideas of this knight maybe coming to c5, or even, we'll see the route it took in the game shortly. My opponent played f4, and this is the Shirov setup. Sometimes white has ideas of g4, g5. Other times white just wants to go f5, even e5, all these aggressive ideas. But the Najdorf is a very solid and counter-attacking opening. That's why I'm quite enjoying playing it at the moment. Now, here I think the best move is b5, but I played queen to c7. I was also considering some strange move like h6 in the game, hoping for g4 when I can play g5. And this is the typical Najdorf idea. For example, if my opponent wins this pawn, my knight on d7 comes to this great outpost on e5. My bishop comes to e7, and I have great play for the pawn. But I thought there wasn't any point after h6 if my opponent just castles kingside here. I thought g5 is not as strong, but maybe it's an interesting idea. Instead, I went queen c7 with a specific idea in mind. Bishop f3, and now my idea, knight to b6. I just wanted to put my knights on this c4 square, attacking some pieces. White sidestepped this idea, bishop f2, and now the knight came to c4, and queen to c1, defend b2. Around here, I was very confident, actually, and I was very happy the way the opening's gone. I mean, I assumed that my knight's got to c4, so this has got to be a good thing. And I thought, well, I could play quietly here, but I thought I've got the initiative. So when you've got the initiative, you've got to play as actively as possible. And this is why I think I'm very happy with this game, because I kept playing active moves. I didn't let my opponent defend. So e5 here, immediately asking the question to the knight and forcing my opponent to make a decision. The knight dropped back to e2, probably the best square, defending c3, quite a solid square for the knight. And now I play d5. And this is more an instinctive move rather than a calculation. You know, I didn't really calculate this. Instinctively, this pawn sacrifice felt correct. The reason for this is I'm trying to bring my bishop on f8 into the game, somewhere like c5 or b4, very quickly. For example, if my opponent took here, I can consider stuff like bringing my bishop to c5 now, and I thought I have quite an interesting position. Or I could also just take on f4 here if I want to play a bit more materialistically. So this just looked like a very sort of natural move to me. My opponent's king is in the middle. Yes, my king is in the middle, but my opponent's piece is a little more passive than mine. The queen on c1, for example. I have this great knight on c4. So I thought it's time to open up the centre here. My opponent took on e5. I recaptured with the knight here. And now my opponent grabbed this pawn on d5. I went into a very long think in this position because I have a lot of interesting moves. For example, knight g4, one interesting move. Another interesting move, bishop to c5. But I decided to stick with bishop to d6 in the end. The reason for this is I thought my opponent might try to defend with some queen f4 move against a lot of other moves. But here this is clearly wrong because I just win the queen. Knight to d3 check. So bishop to d6, and I'm not really worried about my pawn deficit here because I've got very quick development. Castles, my bishop comes out, all my pieces are playing a part. They're all coordinating very well in this position. So I thought this is definitely worth a pawn. I'm also stopping my opponent really castling kingside, trying to get his king to safety because I take on f3, take on h2 check. They have a nice position. So after bishop d6, my opponent played queen g5, and now I simply castled kingside. My opponent castled queenside. So he's a pawn up, but my king is a lot safer compared to my opponent's king. Why is that? Well, I have ideas of b5, b4, and very standard attacking idea. If I can get my bishop to this great square on f5, I can get a rook to c8 and attack on the c file. And I have this knight on the e5, which looks nice. My bishop on d6 has potential to come over here. So I liked my attacking position, and I didn't see how my opponent would do anything on the king side here. My next move, h6, was to force my opponent's queen to a bad square. And now I can go bishop f5, bringing another piece into the game. My opponent played queen d4. I think he loses a bit of the thread of the game here. I go rook on ac8. And I have ideas now of, well, c2 is a major target here. My opponent played queen b6. Again, I'm not convinced about this move. I obviously don't swap queens off because I'm attacking. When you're attacking, you want to keep the big guys on the board to help your attack. So just queen d7. And now my opponent has to deal with this knight coming to c4 and a number of other bits and bobs. My opponent played rook on h to f1 here. And this is where I saw a very interesting possibility, which I was planning for a while here. I mean, okay, I saw that knight to c4 was a good... This was maybe an easy way to win, but I always get carried away with quite imaginative, creative ideas. Sometimes for the wrong reasons, but I saw something like knight to c4, queen b3, b5 should nearly be winning for me because the threat of knight to a5 trapping his queen is so powerful here. But there's another brilliant possibility here. Can you see that possibility? Maybe pause the video if you're not totally sure, but have a look at all checks, all captures. All my pieces are working well. Not surprising, I have a tactical sequence here. Bishop takes c2. He has to take this, and now queen to f5 check. And he only has one move here. If king d2, he loses his queen to knight c4. If king to b3, which looks very risky for him, and indeed it is after knight to c4, attacking his queen. Let's say his queen comes to d4, and now I was planning knight to a5 check. His king has to come to a4, And it's clear to see here that his king should be checkmated very quickly. I mean, at the worst, I can go rook to c4 and win the queen back, but I'm sure it's mate around here. Again, it was really weird, my opponent's behaviour here. I don't know if he's shocked by this, but he just looked like I was playing awful moves, and he played king c1 very quickly, just with a shrug of his hand saying, what are you doing? So maybe he just didn't see my next possibility. Rook takes c3 check. Now, you have to, when you've got the initiative, you have to keep playing with energy and activity. And this move is quite natural to me, to keep the attack flowing. And of course, I worked this up before I played it. If b takes c3, I have bishop a3 check, king d2, and now minimum I have knight c4 check. One very pretty line here, which I may have been tempted to play, but it's not the best, is queen d3 check, king e1, and now queen takes f3. That's just a nice pretty variation. If pawn takes f3, knight takes f3, checkmate. But okay, that's maybe a bit suspect, but it is quite beautiful, checkmate. So my opponent played knight takes c3, and now I think the move he missed, knight to c4. And the problem here is I've got the dual threat of knight takes queen and bishop to f4 check, well, leading to checkmate. And this is a winning position for me. So this tactic worked very well in this game. I mean, he tried to sacrifice his queen. Queen takes d6, and now knight takes d6. The only move I thought he should, could keep the game going for him here was bishop g3. But he was clearly not so happy with his position now. Went rook on fe1, and now rook to c8, bishop d4, and knight to b5. My knights coordinate very well here, and my queen is very good on this diagonal. His king is still in major danger. The game finished bishop e5, knight d7, bishop d4, queen f4 check, bishop e3, queen b4. c3 is under threat, bishop d2, all my pieces attacking now, knight c5, and he resigned here. I was actually hoping that I could create something quite nice on the board, like king to b1, knight a3 check, king c1, and of course here knight to d3 is checkmate immediately, but I think I might have been tempted to play the move queen b3 here, with the idea a takes b3, knight takes b3, checkmate. So I think that was quite an interesting game, and the interesting moments where I think it was, I managed to play with quite a lot of energy there. In the opening, I managed to get this e5 and d5 breaks in just to blast the centre open. And then I kept this initiative, and the major breakthrough was this bishop takes c2 idea, tactical idea. Of course, my opponent's young, and I think maybe we both played a bit funnily there, a bit of psyching out, but this happens when you're young, isn't it? Very talented player, Joseph McPhilips. I'm sure he'll be strong in the future. Anyway, please leave your comments on that game. Quite interesting. I'll try to bring you some more games and more videos shortly.